Okay, I watched this last night and I thought this was fantastic. From 2022, this is Mary McCartney's, yes, that Mary McCartney, If These Walls Could Sing. This is a documentary about Abbey Road Studios in London, England, and it's the history of Abbey Road, and it's the history through the words and memories and opinions of a lot of well-known artists who have worked there. So yes, it's a Beatle documentary. It's Mary McCartney. Like, there's a photo of her as a baby sitting on the floor or a playpen of the studio while her parents, Paul and Linda, are there, you know, recording stuff. It's in almost literally in her blood. So she has access to Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr. So you get a whole lot of Beatles stuff, but it's not just that. But I'm a huge Beatle fan, so I was happy that it had a whole lot of Beatles stuff in it. So they talk about the making of certain records and how records were done and what it was like working there and with the technicians. And you hear from some of the technicians. You see through archival recordings, you see some and hear some bits from the people who ran the studio and founded the studio. And it doesn't just talk about stuff that you've heard of. And when I say you, I mean me. It gets into classical music. It gets out to some very significant classical recordings, and you see footage of that. And you hear modern artists talking about how much it meant to them, those recordings meant to them, and how much it meant to them to then be able to record at Abbey Road Studios themselves. And it was EMI Recording Studios originally, but after the Abbey Road album, I learned this. After the Beatles' Abbey Road album came out, with the famous cover photo taken right outside the studio, they renamed it Abbey Road Studios. And you hear from all kinds of people. You hear from Nile Rodgers, who's there recording some stuff. You hear from Oasis. The brothers recorded separately. You hear from Paul and Ringo, naturally. You hear from Pink Floyd about the recording and footage of them recording Dark Side of the Moon and some other stuff. You hear from Cliff Richard, Sir Cliff. There's a lot of sirs in this, by the way. And on and on and on. It's really, really good. The music is fabulous. There's footage I've never seen before of a lot of these artists doing their thing in the studio. Then the footage looks unbelievably good. Some of it's footage I had seen. I'd never seen it looking like that before. And it's just this warm, wonderful tribute to this place where so much magic happened. You know, it's like the UK version of Sun Studio, basically. And if it was twice as long, I would have been cool with this. It was so much fun. The music was so good. You hear outtakes, you hear very, very rare session recordings, studio chatter, early versions of songs you know really well. If you're a Beatle fan, it's an absolute must. You've probably heard some of the stories and heard some of the music before, but it's still really, really worth it for that. If you're a Pink Floyd fan, it's fascinating. They talked to Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, who was a session guy. He started off very, very young as a session musician, session guitar player for a lot of recordings. He played guitar on the Goldfinger song, the Shirley Bassey recording of Goldfinger, and you get his recollection now, sitting in Abbey Road Studios, of playing on Goldfinger and Shirley Bassey hitting that last note until she passed out. And you hear Shirley Bassey's, some audio of her talking about that, how she's singing along with the image on screen and she has to hold that last note until the next shot comes up, and the shot just holds and holds and holds, and she's holding that note and holding that note and holding that note. So that last note is why it's like that. You hear John Williams talking about scoring the Star Wars movies and the Indiana Jones movies there. And you hear from George Lucas about the importance of that studio and the sound quality of that studio for those films. It's just wonderful. This is available on Disney Plus streaming. It played a few theaters very briefly with Mary McCartney. I think it was really just screenings in advance of it being on Disney Plus, but it lives on Disney Plus. It looks fabulous. It sounds fabulous. It is fabulous. It is If These Walls Could Sing, and I highly recommend it.